about making it contagious, making the awareness it brings something that spreads.
I started working on the piece in 2017. And so I quickly worked for about a month and a half maybe, and then threw up a work in progress. And then since then, kind of each year would kind of continue chipping away at it. And then in 2019, really felt like I had put the piece together and was able to share it in Los Angeles and in New York before COVID hit. And sharing it on stage was no longer possible, at least for the moment. I was 20 years old, studying abroad in London, studying theater, and I wasn't feeling so good. And I decided that I should take advantage of the fact I was living in a country with universal health care, and I went to an urgent care. And that a doctor immediately heard my symptoms, said, "Breathe on me," and knew exactly what I had and sent me to an emergency room. And from there, I was told that I had type 1 diabetes and officially diagnosed. That was the beginning of officially knowing that I was type 1 diabetic and recognizing that the symptoms that I found, troublesome were actually very life-threatening. I was actually about 2 weeks away from a coma, is what the folks in the emergency room laid out for me. This disease goes back to ancient Egypt, and until less than 100 years ago, the anniversary is next year. Basically, we've only had insulin for 100 years. And before that point, your life expectancy was basically less than a year. It could be much, much shorter. And it could be, if they stuck you on a diet of celery, a year, and basically you starved to death because you weren't getting any of the nutrients that your body actually still needs with or without this disease. And so it was a death sentence. And reading that in some of these articles as I was doing the research was really powerful to know that, yeah, it's not a death sentence anymore. I'm still here 17 years later, but equating it then to a life sentence became the easiest way to share that this is an ongoing journey. I find it hard to believe how much folks don't know the symptoms for this disease, yet it's extremely prevalent. And even the symptoms for type 1, start showing up in folks with prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And so part of doing the show is about sharing with folks that, if you are experiencing excessive thirst and excessive hunger and weight loss and fatigue, you want to get some help, because I don't think people realize how deadly this disease can be. In 2012, I actually did a series of video blogs about diabetes, trying to raise awareness. Then in 2017, when I started to want to share my experience as a theatrical presentation, I went back to those video blogs and those scripts and grabbed the really interesting information, like the story of the first time insulin was ever used. And I also teamed up with a co-writer named Guy Zimmerman and a video designer that I had worked with on several operas at Walt Disney Concert Hall, and I had worked on a musical at Center Theater Group with. He came to see it, and he came running up to me after the presentation, and he said, I want to add video to your work. He too had a personal connection to the story I was telling and layered in his expertise. So we then created a stage version that actually already had integrated live feed video as well as video projection as kind of backdrop. And he was the one who helped me pivot. His name is Jason H. Thompson. And he was instrumental in the pivot to the virtual version once COVID hit. I basically surrounded myself with people who do great work and were people I loved being around, and people who understood me and knew that I had this disease. And so we came together and we workshopped that first script over the course of a week and shared it with 3 audiences. And the response was amazing. I was basically asking, what did you think of the script? What do you want more of? Like asking new play development questions. And they just wanted to talk about diabetes. They had no idea, because all of a sudden I was not only sharing the historical information, but I was sharing my existential crisis that is often triggered by living on the edge of a knife's blade, because as I say it in the show, you know, without insulin, I will die painfully. And with too much insulin, I can die within hours. And so all of a sudden, that kind of dynamic really shook people, and they wanted to talk about it. And that was kind of where all of a sudden I knew that for every future presentation that was happening live, I wanted to marry it with a conversation with diabetes educators and nutritionists. Through the course of building the show, I got to know a couple of folks, and then people saw the show and we got connected through the experience of sharing the show with them. And it was remarkable to hear this, like, oh, I relate to that. This is sounding very similar to what I experienced. And I thought, you know, I had gone through this alone. So to me, it was really freeing and grounding to know that I actually wasn't alone, and that what I had been through, while it was my personal journey, it was actually a very universal experience for those of us living with this disease. Somewhere around year 8 is when I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done hiding this really big part of myself. And I made those video blogs, and I have to say, like, it was the best thing that I could have ever done, but I think I needed the time to get to that place. So it's like all chronic illnesses or invisible disabilities, like, you know, it's up to the person to disclose. But I think there's a lot of unnecessary shame and stigma and bias around this disease because of how mysterious it's always seemed and how confused people are. It is not caused by sugar. And people still, when I say that, are like, what are you talking about? Of course it's caused by sugar. And I'm like, no form of diabetes, whether it's type 1, type 2, pre-diabetes, type 3 diabetes, gestational diabetes, like none of them are. And so like part of my goal is to kind of tear down those lies so we can have a real conversation and not feel like we have to hide those aspects of ourselves. It's helped me personally heal, but it's also helped so many other folks. It really empowered me to hear and try my darndest to live by what that nurse shared with me, which is embedded in the show. You now have an opportunity to live a healthier life than everyone else because now you know. And I think that's a really amazing teaching I was given by Carolyn Hughes, this nurse in London, when I was diagnosed. And, you know, I do my darndest to kind of live by that at this point.